button, which means now one piece of software is communicating to another, which is communicating to even more pieces of software. We are waiting to go live across 3 different platforms. One, you'll find us on Facebook. You'll also find us on Periscope. And then finally, you'll find us on YouTube. And it looks like, boom, we're live on all 3. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense lawyer here in the city of Scottsdale in Arizona. And one of the things that we do is we host this show because over the course of our practice, we've represented many, many thousands of people. Unfortunately, people get charged with crimes. Bad things happen. They need some help to get through the situation. In the course of representing many, many good people, we've seen a lot of bad things happen in our justice system. Problems with law enforcement, problems with prosecutors, problems with judges, political problems. Most of this stuff is stemming from the officers, from the boots on the ground, but that doesn't negate the fact that this is a cultural problem and this stuff does start with a lot of the leadership at the top. And so what we've done here is created a show to hold all of those people accountable. So I don't care whether you're a cop or a prosecutor or a judge or a politician, if you are contributing to problems in our criminal justice system and we find out about it, we're going to call it out on this show. The reason being, if we can shine some sunlight on these bad apples, hopefully we can disinfect some of what we're seeing going on our streets. And so that's why we host the show. It's called Watching the Watchers. Unfortunately, there are a lot of bad guys out there masquerading as good guys, and they're doing it behind a gun and a badge. So if you're not familiar with what we do, that's our little introduction. If you have not already hit the subscribe button, well, what the heck are you doing? It's right there. Just hit that button so that you can be apprised of the future conversations that we have. Okay, today on the show, we've got kind of a packed show, and we've got a lot of information that we want to get to. I'm going to be joined here in about 10-15 minutes by a good friend of mine, James Palestini, and he is an attorney who I actually went to law school with. I know him very well. We spent a lot of time together in courtrooms and at other law firms, so he's going to be joining us on the show today, and we're going to start with a case that he actually worked on. Her name is Mariah Valenzuela, and she was assaulted by a Phoenix police officer who goes by the names of Officer McGillis, somebody that the defense community in the state of Arizona has had a lot of problems with for a long time. And he, in my opinion, assaulted her during an arrest. Of course, most of the time that we have these types of stories, they're out of state, and I don't personally know the people who worked on the case, but because this happened right in our backyard, right in Phoenix, I happen to know the attorney who worked on it. So he's going to join us today. We've got body camera footage. We've got police, the police had a response that they put out, a public relations statement. So we're going to analyze some of that, and we're going to really lean on James to help us understand what happened in the case, since, of course, he was the one who was working on it. So he'll be joining us here shortly. And then we've got some pretty good updates just across the board on a lot of the different stories that we've covered over the year, specifically Ahmaud Arbery. There's been some developments. The McCloskeys, you remember I talked about them a couple weeks ago. Mr. and Mrs. Rambo, there's some stuff developing there. We've got Breonna Taylor. We've got just George Floyd. The body camera footage was apparently released just today, just a few hours before this show started. I haven't found it yet or had a chance to watch it, but I do know that it was released. And so we're going to be getting into a lot of that. But before we are joined by James here shortly, I want to talk about the Phoenix Police Department. The Phoenix Police Department, this is an agency that I think kind of doesn't get the same microscope, the same focus that a lot of the other agencies around our country do, right? Most of the time when we think of big police departments, just because we've seen them in the movies, we think of the NYPD or we think of the LAPD. Most of the cop shows are in one of those two locations, and it's, they've kind of got this cultural history of being big departments that handle big things, and we've seen that in our culture. We've seen that in our popular media, on movies and TV shows and things like that. Phoenix kind of gets forgotten about, which is probably to their liking, but they just don't get, in my opinion, from an outside observer, they don't get the same level of scrutiny that some of these other agencies do. And they should. and we're going to talk about why. But I want you to know, remember, Phoenix and Arizona, Maricopa County, we're one of I think we're the 5th biggest county in the entire country. We've got a lot of activity here, and we've got a big police force to help police our population. And so when you start looking at the numbers, I want to give a hat tip to Liz. Her name's Elle, and she actually showed me this website that exists. I want to share it with you because it's pretty indicative of a problem that exists. So the name of this website is called mappingpoliceviolence.org. And if you navigate to the right screen, you're going to get to a screen that looks just like this. And I want to walk you through what we're actually looking at here. So on this right-hand side, this has the total volume of people who have been killed by law enforcement. And you can see that they are breaking them down by race. So we've got Black, Hispanic, it looks like Native American, Asian. We've got the Pacific Islander, white, and then unknown. And as we're going through, we can see that Phoenix Police Department's right near the top. Okay, right? Remember when I was saying that we sort of have this hierarchy? NYPD is really big. LAPD, of course, Chicago is going to be in there. Sort of where the major population epicenters are around the country. And of course, they're going to have more police activity, more crime, more killings, and more problems. And so you would expect them to be at the top. But you'll notice Phoenix is beating out some of these other places. Phoenix is actually, we've got more killings than Chicago. We've got more killings than New York, more killings than Houston or San Antonio or Jacksonville or any of these other places. The only one that beats us or is worse than us, I wouldn't call it a win, is they've got more deaths is LA. So LAPD, the Los Angeles Police Department, which is kind of surprising, right? Because the city of Phoenix, population-wise, is not the same size as LA or NYPD. The city of Phoenix is actually much smaller. When I'm talking about the 5th biggest county, I'm talking about Maricopa County, which covers a lot of different cities. But the city of Phoenix by itself, even though our population is nowhere near the size of LA or New York, we have more killings than they do. It's pretty clear just from these numbers. You can see, look where we are. It's not even close. Chicago is not even close. It's probably 30% less just by looking at this graph here. And you can see here some of the demographics. Arizona just in general doesn't have a huge African-American population. Our Hispanic population is large. And so they are sort of receiving, the Hispanic community is receiving sort of the lion's share of the minority killings. And we've got the white population here, and of course an unknown segment here. So in terms of the relative numbers, you can see here that we have a lot less African Americans being killed, but we have a lot more total killings. And of course that's not a good thing. It's just the numbers, and of course they are not looking good, which my point is we have a problem with the Phoenix Police Department. If you take a look at this other graph here on the left, what you're going to see is these numbers are normalized for population. So what they're doing is they're taking the total number of killings and they're basically dividing them by 1 million people so that you can get the average killings per million in population. So what that's doing is normalizing it across the board so we can see who is actually doing the most killing relative to the population size. And of course, the Phoenix Police Department is right there again. So right near the top is the Phoenix Police Department. You can see that right here. We've got 11 police killings for every 1 million people. And the only 2 places that are basically worse than that, you can see right here, Oklahoma City and St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department. The other ones are just further down the list. We've got a pretty significant death rate from our police department here in Phoenix, and we've been seeing a lot more of that. We've been seeing, last week we spoke about and spent a lot of time talking about James Garcia. If you remember, he was the gentleman who was in his car and multiple police officers actually surrounded him, and allegedly he pulled a gun and they shot him. They killed him, basically execution style. We had some of the video that was released last week. More of these videos are trickling out, and we just have not seen them yet, but we certainly will. And when that stuff comes across our desk on our channel, we'll be sure to bring that to your attention as well. And so today we want to start with this idea. We want to talk about the Phoenix Police Department. What are they doing? Why are their numbers so sort of askew, right? You can see it from this graph. We have a lot smaller population than LA, but almost the same amount of deaths. We've got a lot smaller population, but our killings basically per capita are a lot higher than some of these other jurisdictions. So why is that? What's going on? On this channel, I've had a lot of thoughts about that over the many shows that we've done. And I think by and large, this is a pretty big cultural problem that we're seeing that exists in the different levels of our government, the different levels of our police department. And what can we do about that? So today I want to spend a little time talking about a new case. This one was just released in The Guardian. This was an article that just came out, and it talks about a woman named Mariah Valenzuela. And we're going to be joined by her defense attorney here in a minute, so I'm going to wait for him to get set up. I want to tell you a story about an encounter I had personally with the Phoenix Police Department while we're waiting for James to hop on here. I see he's getting situated, so we'll be right there with him in a moment. But I talk about this story in my book, actually, Beginning to Winning. If you haven't gotten your copy, it's available on Amazon, plug. But it is a story that I tell when I was in law school. I was a first-year law school student, and I actually wanted to be a prosecutor before becoming a criminal defense lawyer. And I thought, I'm going to work my way up. I'll probably go into politics, become a district attorney or something like that, and then run for office, that kind of traditional track. I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know any better, but that was my vision as kind of a naive first-year law school student. So one of the things I wanted to do in order to be a good prosecutor was learn a little bit more about how the police department worked. And I had never had any experience with it. I didn't know, really anybody in my family was never a law enforcement officer. And so I went on a ride along with a Phoenix Police Department officer. Very young, totally naive. And I just said, hey, I'll just like to go on a ride along and learn a little bit more about what you do. That way I can be a better prosecutor because I'll have boots on the ground experience. So we did. I went down to one of the substations here in Phoenix, and we went on a ride along. We spent a night sort of just driving around, writing people tickets all night long. And we had a number of really sort of disturbing incidents that I saw happen. People were, I think, getting taken advantage of. People were getting stopped for reasons that were sort of not really genuine, or in my interpretation of what I knew at that time was it didn't feel like it was a genuine like the law didn't exist for this. The law wasn't intended to do these things that these officers were doing. But the officer that I was driving with, we made probably 10 traffic stops. He probably impounded 5 cars that night. Multiple people were arrested. Multiple traffic tickets were handed out. And this officer sort of had a reputation for being very, very aggressive. And basically, after every single time that we got back in his police vehicle, after he wrote a ticket or impounded a car or whatever it is he was doing, he would literally actually audibly tell you how much money he thought he was generating for the city based on that arrest. So for example, he would say, okay, driving on a suspended license ticket, right? May not sound like a big deal. In Arizona, if you get stopped for that, they impound your car. It's a class 1 misdemeanor, the same as a DUI. It has penalties, it has fines. And so basically what he would do is he would say, okay, this person's car just got impounded. So what's going to happen is they're going to have to pay $250 to get it out. If they can't afford that, it's going to be another $75 per day. If they can't get it out after the 30 days, then eventually it's going to be basically forfeited. The government's going to take it. That car is probably worth $3,000. And so he would just have this running tally. And then he would say, by the time she goes to court and pleads this down, it's probably going to be a fine of $500. And so just on and on and on. And so this guy would just create this tally. And then he would, as the night went on, he was just keeping score, basically a scoreboard of how much money he was generating for the city. And it made my stomach churn. It was one of those things that was kind of an eye-opening experience for a naive law school student to think this is what it feels like an excuse for justice. This is what justice is. This is what the cops do. And it was a pretty eye-opening experience. And there are situations where you do have police officers who sort of fall into that mold. We're not going to talk about that officer today. I don't even know if he's still on the force, but there is another officer that has a reputation very similar to that. He's somebody that the defense community has known for a long time as a problematic officer. We've been saying this for years. He's been with the department for a long time. And now some of this officer's misdeeds are coming to light. And specifically, they're coming to light because of a situation, a case with this woman. Her name is Mariah Valenzuela, and I'm going to bring James on here in a minute to tell us a little bit about it. Mariah Valenzuela, so she is, well, let's bring James on. Let's have James kind of give us an introduction. James, let me see if I can make sure that you're ported in here. Looks like you're there. James, can you hear me?
I can hear you. How you doing, Rob?
Doing well, man. Thanks for taking the time to hop on the show. And so why don't we start with you kind of telling me about, so you're a criminal defense lawyer, and, these are the types of cases you work on, very regularly. Can you kind of walk us through sort of, what happened with this case, right? Because you and I, we see this happen all the time. We have somebody come to our office and they say, I was assaulted by the police, and it's one of those things that's kind of difficult to piece together, because everybody feels like they were assaulted by the police, and many of them are. But walk me through sort of, what happened here. How did you investigate this? Kind of, how did this whole thing unfold for you from your perspective?
Sure. So the first time I met my client was, of course, at court. And when she attended court, she had actually still had some lingering injuries from her encounter with Officer McGillis. She had a pretty grotesque eye injury. And she told me, she goes, yeah, you see this eye? This is what this cop did to me. There's body cam. I want to get the body cam. She was not happy, rightfully so, after seeing the body cam. But I immediately requested body cam on the case. And I got that body cam footage a couple months later. As you know, Rob, it takes a long time to get body cam footage in Phoenix. But once I got that, I started looking through the body cam footage. And one of the first videos I reviewed was video from one of the sergeants, so the supervisor in this case, who was talking about having to review Officer McGillis's body cam because there were some allegations of use of force. And so I found that interesting. And then the sergeant started getting into some pretty colorful language, as far as saying things like, hey, this is a CYA situation. Hey, this girl's Looney Tunes, quote unquote, which I think was incredibly disrespectful and inappropriate. And so that kind of piqued my interest. And as I made my way down through the body cam, I finally got to Officer McGillis's body cam. And if I know you've seen it, Rob, if any of your viewers haven't seen it, I highly recommend to go take a look as soon as you can. The video is, full disclosure, the video's a little tough to watch. It shows Officer McGillis getting out of his DUI van. And that's one thing, Rob, that I want to stress. He wasn't in a squad car, not your typical police vehicle. He was in the DUI van, so the phlebotomist van, essentially where he does his blood draws. Big, white box van. I think a reasonable person getting pulled over by a big white van, they would probably be a little curious as to, what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that transferred through on the body cam. You can see my client goes, what's up? Like, why am I getting pulled over? Officer McGillis doesn't tell her why. Says, let me see some ID. You see my client kind of look toward her vehicle, almost like, oh, my ID's in there, but wait, why are you pulling me over? And McGillis immediately goes and grabs her and throws her on the ground. And I mean, you can see from this video, it escalated so quickly. It went from 0 to 60 in just a few seconds. And there was just no reason for it to go that way. I mean, Officer McGillis claims that he stopped my client for traveling in opposing lane of traffic. He claimed that he had video of that. That video was never disclosed. There's no evidence, no proof that she was ever driving in opposing lane of traffic. I personally, there was a process for a stop, but here we are. He stopped her, and for something like failure to show ID, for an officer to go and throw someone on the ground for that, I just don't think that that can be justified, and I don't think that we as American citizens should accept that. I really don't.
Yeah, I'm with you, my friend, and I think I have the tech queued up. I do want to play it because I would like to kind of walk through it. It's going to be difficult for me, I think, to play it and talk with you. So let me play it, and then we'll
Sure.
sort of back up because I want to dive into to that basis, because something happens as we're watching it. So for the viewers, you're going to see, like James just described, this officer walks up to her, and I didn't realize, by the way, that it was a DUI van. That makes a lot more sense. It's like, why is this moving van pulling me over, right? People already get concerned when they're getting pulled over on the side of the road. As you're going to see in the video, it's late at night, but he's approaching her and he's having a conversation, and then suddenly he just snaps. And you and I know why that is. It's because it's an identification issue that they're going to latch onto. That's going to be the justification for it. But she had no idea, right? So let me just play this, and then let me see if I can get this rolling. Wait, that's not what I wanted. All right, so let's walk through this.
Stop! Stop! Why don't you act like a young lady?
You're manhandling me.
No, I'm not. I'm trying to
You
get you.
slammed my head.
Stop!
Okay, so
Why am I in handcuffs?
He was southbound in the northbound number 1 lane. I don't know why.
and James, do you know when these pictures were taken? Were they?
These were right after the incident.
Tom
not
600 code
the
6.
night of, but right after.
Okay.
What's your license?
I don't have it on me.
You have any ID on you?
Why am I getting pulled over?
I'm at 600 West Indian School Road.
Why am I getting pulled over?
Is this your car?
No.
Bravo John Sam
Why am I getting pulled over?
5455. Do you have ID on you?
No. Why am I
Why
getting
should
pulled
you
over?
get pulled over?
Hands behind your back.
Excuse me.
Put your hands behind your back.
No.
Put your hands behind your back. Stop. 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 Hands behind your back.
Yeah, she's getting assaulted.
Put your hands behind your back.
Oh, she
Put
got
your hands
slammed
behind your
hard.
back.
Yeah,
And
she's
multiple
Stop.
times, Rob.
Hands behind your
can't
back.
really see too well on the video, but he's
Tom
picking
600.
her up a little bit and
Give me another
pushing
unit.
her back down.
Why are you
And he does that multiple times.
I'm asking for your ID. You said you don't have any ID.
Can I get it? It's in my car.
You said you didn't have ID.
I do. What did I do?
Give me your arm.
Let me get my car.
Give me your arm. Stop. Stop. Give me your arm. Put your arm. Give me your arm.
What did I do?
You were in the wrong lane. You were in opposite lane of travel.
What?
Give me your ID.
No, I wasn't.
So he finally
Give me your
tells
arm,
her.
please.
yeah. Finally tells her. That's probably a minute or 30 seconds later.
Give me your
Absolutely.
hand.
She's already on the ground.
I did nothing wrong, sir.
Stop.
What the
Yeah, there's the van, right?
You were in
Yep.
opposing lane.
No, I wasn't.
Yes, you were.
Well, what would you do if you got pulled over by that van?
Right.
I don't know if I'd stop, first of all.
Right.
Leave my phone.
I'm locking it. Stop.
Anything back for it?
I'm no harm. I can
Tom 600.
cooperate
I've got her
with you.
detained, but she's real uncooperative.
I
Stand up. Stand up.
It's in the car.
Okay, well then you should have told me that. You could have given it to me. Stop
You
arguing.
give her a chance.
Stop.
Yeah, didn't even give her a chance.
Stop. Why don't you act like a young lady?
Wow. There you go.
Handling me.
Yeah.
What does that
No,
mean,
I'm
Rob?
not. I'm trying to
You
get you.
slammed my head.
Stop.
Why am I in handcuffs? Why am I
She
in
seemed like she was acting pretty like a lady to me. I mean, he was the one who got physical. She
You act
didn't.
like I'm a fucking threat. Are you serious?
Why are you acting this way?
Because you're hurting me, sir.
From the get-go, you've been screaming and yelling.
Because
So
you're
stop.
hurting me.
I'm not hurting you.
Why am I arrested? Why am I handcuffs?
Because
When
I
was
asked for ID.
cooperating.
No, I asked for ID.
It's
and
in the car. Can I get it?
Well, I'll get it now.
Okay,
You
McGillis.
refused. You refused to give it to me.
It's in the car.
Well, you should have just given it to me.
Well, can you let me go so I can get it?
No, I'll get it in a minute.
Yeah, and so as he put her there, he actually kind of hit her head again, right?
Yep.
Go for Mike.
Yeah, and then now they're in the car.
I'm out here on Indian School. I don't know if you heard it.
The 101, yeah, saying her head's bleeding or something.
Yeah, the DUI, and she does. She's got blood on her hand, but it's because she was sitting there wiping it over and over again. But
So the
she's
guy
got
knows
about
what he's talking about. So this has been
maybe a
talked about
quarter
with a
to-
couple of the officers.
It's not
This
a
is the
half
talk
inch,
of the town
just
tonight.
about a quarter-inch cut on the top of her head.
Look at him
It
downplaying
might
the
need
injury.
a stitch.
Yeah. It's her fault for
And
rubbing
she's
the
got, like,
blood
you can
that
tell
they
she probably
caused.
bumped her head
Yeah,
on the ground when he
classic
took her to the
victim
ground.
blaming.
So I'm going to do the use of force for McGillis. And then,
There was no strikes or anything. It's more like just like an injured prisoner, right?
oh yeah, she was she was freaking out about it, and when he actually had to take her to the ground, I think it was either that or when he tried to push her up against the car. So she's like super emotional, super Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're going to get her checked out. Let's make sure we
Looney
do photos
Tunes.
and stuff. Yeah, like you said, do that. We'll do the injured prisoner / use of force just to see why ourselves.
Yeah.
There's nothing. When we get, is she alleging any misconduct or anything, or is she just complaining about the injury?
She thinks she was kind of manhandled or whatever, but I don't think it's. I'm getting ready to review the body camera right now. She's super all over
I
the
don't
place.
think it, but he hasn't even reviewed it.
Okay, no,
Yeah.
that's what I was going to say. Let's
They've
just
made their
wait for
decision before
review
they've
the
even
camera,
looked
make
at
sure
it.
it looks good to go, and then we'll do the use of force just to CYA everybody.
Yeah, there it is.
Yep.
But sounds good. Keep me posted.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah, so obviously that's pretty disturbing. Thanks for letting me play that. So one of the things that I think a lot of stuff came up on that, but first and foremost, right? Tell me about your client. Isn't she's like 5'2", like 98 pounds or something like that? I mean, she's really little.
Really tiny.
Yeah. So this guy, she's stopped in the middle of the road in the middle of the night by somebody in a big white van who is, immediately rushing up to her, and she asks questions about why are you stopping me, essentially. And so walk us through. I mean, what's their justification for it, right? It's the ID thing.
So I think their justification for the stop is that she's in an opposing lane of traffic, which of course they weren't able to provide proof of. But then the justification Phoenix uses to effectuate an arrest and take her down is that she didn't show ID. So they're claiming, okay, that's a misdemeanor charge, they can arrest them. But then they claim that for, and I quote, not only the officer's safety, but my client's safety, he took her to the ground. That was their justification for the officer and her safety. I found that just disgusting. I couldn't believe that they actually said that.
Yeah, I mean, well, you can see. So, this is at the outset of the show, I was talking about kind of this cultural problem, and you can see right there. I mean, that guy who was in that other officer who was in the van talking to his supervisor, or the vehicle or whatever he was in, was saying, essentially, I mean, from the very get-go, that this is all about CYA. He was already basically covering for McGillis, saying that she's Looney Tunes, but I haven't even watched the body camera yet, right? She's rubbing blood all over herself like she did that. It's like, no, guys, your officer did that. He caused her to bleed. The fact that she's bleeding is on you. So I guess the justification for the legal justification is she failed to provide ID, right? It sounds like that's kind of what they're latching onto. By her saying, I don't have ID, they're saying that was a refusal, and that's a crime, and that is the arrest, or that's the arrestable offense.
That's correct. That's what they're saying.
Yeah, and so he could have easily just gone to her and said, here's why I need your ID, right? I need your ID because it's a crime to not give me it, and I'm investigating you for DUI, but for some reason he thought that we're just going to smash her on the ground.
No, it was just escalation right from the beginning. And it goes back to your comment previous about the cultural issue. This is how Phoenix police conduct business. And time again, we've been seeing this. And I think an important thing to mention, Rob, is that the Phoenix police are saying, hey, this isn't a common thing. It's only recent, because of all the protests and now, people are fighting back with police. That's, we've been doing this long enough and we've seen this since the start of our careers. I mean, this has always been happening, and you're only seeing it now because of body cam footage, and two, because now the public is taking an interest in this. So stories like this aren't going unnoticed. You could go to a reporter, 6-7 years ago and have some kind of body cam footage like this, and maybe the reporter would run with it, but no one would really go and look at it, But now times are changing.
Well, I was going to ask you about this specifically because, 6 years ago, I think 6 months ago, I'm not sure that this would have caught the Guardian's attention or the national news. I know you've been super busy talking to people about this, and I appreciate your time coming on this show. But, this is something that I think because of the heightened level of scrutiny, it's finally getting the attention. But I will tell you, and this is not to belittle anything that your client went through, that Mariah went through. I mean, what she suffered was horrendous, but we see this all the time, I guess is my point, right? I mean, I've seen this many times. You've seen this many times. We see these exact situations where the cops do this to people and they just get away with it.
They get away with so much. And when they get away with this kind of stuff, it just encourages the behavior, and they go back and they do it again, and it escalates.
So why do you think that, look, you and I, so this particular officer, we've got a laundry list of things that we could go through. I'm not going to take your time doing that, but there are sort of other kind of indicators of misconduct or malfeasance. Can you talk about any of those, like some of the history of McGillis or what you know about the guy?
Sure. So I can't get in too much to the specifics just because there's a lot of other attorneys that have much more knowledge on it than I do. They have the firsthand experience. I wasn't the attorney on a lot of these cases, but from my understanding, there are, just about the entire defense bar knows McGillis's name. There have been multiple issues that have come up over the years with his behavior, how he conducts himself, how he treats people. And I think it's up until, this video came out. I mean, he's never really had to face any kind of public scrutiny. And so I'm thankful for outlets like The Guardian who covered this. I think they did a great job describing what happened and also describing who my client is. But I think that the important thing is that his conduct, McGillis's conduct, is finally getting out there for people to see. And there's got to be accountability here. And I don't think there's going to be. And I say that because I see how Phoenix Police Department is now doubling down and defending him. They actually released a YouTube video about 2 hours ago, Rob. And it was a video of the body cam footage spliced together, similar to what The Guardian did, with their own commentary. And in that video, they say some pretty similar things to their written statement, accusing my client of committing crimes and whatnot. But I think it's very telling that that video was deleted about 40 minutes after it was posted. It hasn't come up since. I would only hazard to guess that maybe they realize how stupid it was posting that. Because I think it opens them up to civil liability for defamation specifically. But I'll let the civil attorneys handle that.
Yeah, that's outside of my wheelhouse also. So the Phoenix Police Department, so you're right. They put this YouTube video up, and the Phoenix Police they've been doing actually, I think, a better job of managing their public relations. I commented on this last week. Now they are doing sort of these rapid response videos. If you follow the Phoenix Police Department on Facebook, you'll see them. They get these out quickly. Anytime that there's a critical incident, they put out these sort of it's essentially propaganda. You know, it's their version of
It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just call it what it is. It's pure, you know, police propaganda. Another commenter on this show calls it copaganda, which I think is hilarious.
I like that.
Yeah, it's pretty clever. And you know, it's one of those things that they're trying to get ahead of it. They're trying to release their side of the story so that they control the narrative. But unfortunately, they're leaving out some pretty key things. And I think they got ahead of themselves on this YouTube video one, because I saw it, right? You know, everybody's passing this video around. We watch it. There's allegations that she was going the wrong way, that she was breaking the law, and that basically essentially all of this was deserved and justified. The Phoenix Police Department also released a public relations statement. Did that satisfy you or your client when you read that?
That was unbelievable.
Yeah.
When I read that. I couldn't believe that they came out and were defending him the way that they were doing. I mean, it was just, it was unbelievable, some of the things that they said.
Yeah. They're really, it seems to me like they're really circling the wagons on this thing, you know, and this is pretty typical. This is why we started this entire show, right? Anytime law enforcement comes under the gun, they circle up. Politicians, you know, line up behind them. You know, all of the police, you know, the unions have a lot of power, and they rally around their officers who are coming under fire. And, you know, it's kind of to tie this all back to my point at the beginning about Phoenix police making a ton of money for the city. Officer McGillis, he drives that DUI van around and he's just rounding people up, you know, just generating a ton of revenue. Do you think that has anything to do with why some of this misconduct is allowed to sort of fester kind of under the radar?
Sorry, you cut out there. What was your question, Rob?
So my question was, I'm kind of trying to understand some of the motivations. Why do these officers, why are they allowed to continue to exist? Is it a financial thing? At the start of the show, I was talking about, you know, officers generating significant revenue for the city, and that's sort of why there's a financial incentive to keep them around. Any thoughts on kind of this cultural problem, or why this stuff is allowed to sort of simmer under the radar as long as it has?
Sure. So, I mean, I think you bring up a really great point as far as officers being revenue generators, specifically in Officer McGillis's case. I don't know if you've looked at his salary online. It's public record. I want to say off the top of my head, I think he makes $150K a year. And with overtime and everything like that, I think it's like upwards of $200K. And I'm not saying that because I think officers shouldn't make that. Personally, I think we underpay officers. I think they're undertrained and they're underpaid. And so I want to make that clear. But I think that for McGillis probably stops the most people out of any officer in Phoenix when it comes to DUIs. He's a phlebotomist as well. He's on just about every Phoenix DUI case that I have. So he is bringing in a lot of money for Phoenix. And I mean, he's definitely out there working. And so I would hope that that's not the reason why these officers go about protecting him, because it comes down to money, because policing shouldn't come down to money. It should have the goal of protecting society. It shouldn't be about money. But of course, you know, here we are in 2020 and, you know, money makes the world go around. But I think there are a lot of other issues out there. I mean, you've got this whole concept of a thin blue line. And officers always have to have each other's backs. And, you know, you see this often where if there's an officer that speaks out against another officer for how that officer behaved, that officer who speaks out is ostracized and loses their job. So I'm sure you can also vouch for this, Rob. I mean, I've had several officers that have contacted me on this case now. I've had at least 4, and they said, "Hey, James, I saw that footage. That's horrendous. That cop needs to be charged with assault." I had 4 officers specifically call me and tell me this guy needs to get fired. But those officers will never, ever say that out loud, because they'll lose respect from other officers, or they'll lose their job, and that's their livelihood, and they're afraid. And so we need to create a mechanism in the police force where these officers aren't afraid to speak out against wrongdoing. I mean, look at the George Floyd. You saw that video. I mean, the officer had his knee on George Floyd's neck for, I mean, I think upwards of 8 minutes, and you have two other officers that are just freaking watching, not doing anything. And I would presume that they probably didn't want to get in trouble. They didn't want to get fired. They wanted to seem like they had their other issue would know, hey, this isn't right.
Yeah, it is a disturbing thing, and or the other reason is because that's just what they do. That's just business as usual. That's normal operating procedures, and they're used to doing that. So why would they stop their fellow officer from having their knee on somebody's neck if that's okay, according to their sort of internal code on how these things work. And you're right, we talk about this stuff all the time. Cops are always just standing there watching each other, and this is why I have a problem with that, like, a few bad apples argument, which I agree. I'm with you. I am not somebody who thinks that every single cop is bad. There is, there is that contingent of defense lawyers. There's that contingent of society that we need to defund all police, and every single, cop is a pig, and they all need to lose their jobs or worse. And I certainly don't subscribe to that. I'm with you. I think that if we have, higher quality individuals with better training, more incentives, and better mechanisms for policing our streets, then I think that would be improved. But in a situation like this, you kind of touched on it. Do you see anything happening to this officer? Do you see charges being filed? Do you think that the Maricopa County Attorney's Office is going to consider that?
If the defense community and of course, the community here in Phoenix keeps pushing on this specific issue, they contact the mayor, they contact Alistair Adele, they contact some of the people running for county attorney, push these people on, what are you going to do about this? Something needs to happen about this. This can't just fall to the wayside. There needs to be some accountability. If we can continue to push and strike while the iron is hot, I think that there can be some change. But I am very skeptical of that happening. Because we see it all the time. This stuff happens all the time, and nothing ever happens to the officer. So, I mean, I'm not going to get my hopes up. I mean, does something need to happen? Absolutely. There needs to be accountability. Do I think it's going to happen? Probably not.
Yeah, we're going to see. It is one of those things. You can kind of feel it. Like, you kind of know by watching the responses that they've made the decision. They can fall one way or the other. If they're gonna fall on the sword for somebody, they do it, and I think that that's what they're going to do. So I'm with you. I'm not super optimistic about it, but the fact that you're out there fighting, the fact that you're on this show, you're on other shows, we're talking about these issues, the fact that even the Guardian wrote a story about this. I mean, like I said, I think a year ago you send them this video, or your client sends them the video, and they go, okay, it's not that bad. It's like a lot that they've probably seen too, because this happens all the time. This is a common type of a thing. And it definitely shouldn't be. All right. So, last question, last thoughts, how is Mariah doing? How are you doing? She is, I'm certain, under the same, level of scrutiny that kind of you're under now. This has become a national story, and, how's she dealing with the stress? How are you doing with it all?
Well, as far as how Mariah is doing, I won't talk too much about that. I'll let her do the talking about that. I believe that, I don't know. She might be making a statement. I don't know what's going to happen with that. Okay. Her civil attorney is working with her on that.
Got it.
But, as far as, my position goes, I'm truly heartbroken that this had to happen to her. And that being said, too, I am very happy that it didn't escalate further. I think that she's lucky in the sense that, she's able to walk away with her life. I'm not saying that to be over dramatic, because there are so many videos out there where this ends so much worse. And so, in that sense, it's a good thing.
James, you broke.
But, Rob, at the same time, I think it's a good thing that this story is getting out, because now it's shining a light on Phoenix PD.
Yeah, I agree, man. And I completely agree with that. And I'm glad that there are good defense lawyers like you out there who are willing to kind of go the extra mile on this thing. You know, there are other attorneys who don't watch body cameras. I know, you know.
I know. It's crazy to me. You have to, if you want to do a good job for your client, you want to be a zealous advocate, which all of us should be, you got to look at everything.
I know. Unfortunately, many lawyers don't, but you are one of the good guys, of course. Tell me where people can find you, how they can connect with you, how can they follow you, your Palestini law, but give us some further information.
Sure. So my website, .com, Instagram as well, and that's Palestini Law on there, as well as Facebook. I just started my new firm last week, so all very new to this, which has been fun, just getting kind of thrust into the public eye with this case. Within a week of having my own firm has been pretty wild. So it's been pretty busy over here, but very exciting too. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now, as far as being able to reach me, and we'll see kind of how things go here.
All right, awesome. And so you broke up when you said your website, so it's palestinilaw.com?
Palestinilaw.com.
All right, awesome. So that's James Palestini. James, thanks so much. I'm going to let you go. Thanks again for coming on the show. Everybody check him out. It's Palestini Law, and follow him on Instagram and Facebook. James, thanks so much. We'll catch you later, my friend. All right. So that was James. That was James Palestini, a good friend of mine, known him for a long time, doing a great job on these types of stories, on these types of cases. Obviously, that was a pretty traumatic, situation for Mariah Valenzuela, but I think James, of course, makes a very good point that all of this stuff is now coming to light, and we want to see more of that. We want more sunlight. We want more disinfectant, more transparency, and James is a big part of that. So check him out, palestinilaw.com. You can also head over to Facebook and Instagram. I think his Instagram's pretty solid. He's got some good memes on there. So all right, so let's talk about some other stories. Let's go ahead and all right, so we've got, what do we want to transition to? Let's talk about George Floyd. George Floyd, his body camera footage was apparently released, kind of released. We don't actually have it. So before the show started, just like 2 hours before, we got all these notifications that the George Floyd videos have been released, but we were not able to find it. So I checked with Miss Faith, of course, who helps me show prep, and she has said that it sounds like a lot of these, basically the video have been released to the media, and we don't have a copy yet. So unfortunately, we don't have that to share with you today. The next story that we've got are George Floyd related. So believe it or not, 150 officers from Minneapolis have filed for disability claims, saying that they have PTSD from the George Floyd protests. So 150 officers now have PTSD. I'm going to talk about the story. So the city has experienced an increase in crime. Mayor Ron Muser says the past 2 months have pushed many officers to the breaking point. Many officers are now at the breaking point because of riots in the city, I guess is what it is. Muser also said he's seeing PTSD symptoms of officer with highly diminished capacity to live and socialize, extraordinary rates of divorce, alcohol dependency just to cope. It's an emotional crisis that cannot and should not continue. Officers are texting loved ones goodbye messages, counting ammunition in case they need to shoot themselves instead of being beaten to death. Muser said they were left alone without support from city leaders. That's what it comes down to. 75 officers have left the force or turned in paperwork with the intention of leaving. So, of course, we do not want officers to be dying by suicide, to be abusing alcohol, to be living in emotional turmoil and emotional crisis. And it's not my opinion to say whether this is true or whether this is accurate or not. But to me, I do suspect a pretty serious ulterior motive here. If you recall, right, all of these different cities are slowly and surely starting to defund the police. And Minneapolis, I believe, was one of them. We covered it here that they started defunding, and I'm not sure if that has actually gone into fruition yet. But my understanding is the city council or whatever body they use to govern their city is now saying, we're going to actually start defunding you. So if there's no funds, how are these officers going to get paid? Well, they're not, and they can see the writing on the walls is what this looks like to me. So they're bailing out. They're going to be using whatever the legally contracted terms were between the police department and the police union, or however they do things there. They're negotiating. They've got legal terms, and so they have an exit clause. And so that's what the police are doing. They're using this as an exit clause. They're saying now we have PTSD because of, the public is, I guess, mad at us. I mean, these are the same, hardened officers, the same heroes, the same people who are making sacrifices for the public. These are people who are saving lives, so we're told. And, at the first sign of trouble, boom, they turn in their paperwork. They've got the intention of leaving, and suddenly they've got PTSD. So I really have no intention of bad mouthing anybody with PTSD. I know a lot about mental issues. It's been something that I've unfortunately had to deal with in my family. And so I get that, but 150 of them, 150 Minneapolis officers filing for disability for PTSD. I would really love to know what each individual claim was. What caused this PTSD? What is the issue? And by the way, guys, what about the PTSD on the rest of the entire world and society that came out of your department, out of your city? You guys sat around, stood by, watched George Floyd be suffocated to death. Do you think that instills confidence in people about police from around our country? Do you think that people woke up the next day after they watched that video and said, I feel really good about law enforcement? Or maybe they feel scared. Maybe they're African American. Maybe they don't have a lot of means and they're out on the streets. Maybe these are people who are concerned that this could happen to them and they're living in PTSD. And this is something that they have to carry forward with them every single day that they're alive. What about that PTSD? So I would really like to know. I would love to know. Look, if there's a handful of officers out of that 150 who actually are suffering from something, I wish them well. I wish them, a speedy recovery. I hope they get the treatment they need. But is it that? Is it really PTSD? Or are these guys using an escape hatch to get out of their contracts and collect disability while there's still money in the coffers? Could it be that? It may be. All right. Next story that we have is an Ahmaud Arbery update. Ahmaud Arbery. So if you remember Ahmaud Arbery, this was the case where the three white guys were chasing down the African-American guy, Ahmaud Arbery, who was running out of a house, running down the street. They circled up around him and they pulled the shotgun out and they shot him 3 times. Well, there was a lot of confusion about that case. There was a lot of people who said that shooting and that killing was justified. And they stayed out of custody for like 2.5 months. It went to multiple different prosecutors. Nobody ever got arrested until the video leaked. And of course, when the video leaked, the rest of the public saw what a disgusting situation this was. And those 3 people, Travis McMichael, Gregory McMichael, and William Roddy Bryan, were all arrested for felony murder amongst other charges. And so they are actually scheduled for a court date on July 17th. July 17th at 10 a.m. They're going to be in court. There is a new prosecutor who's been assigned to the case. Their name is Joyette Holmes, who is African American. He's a black man or woman, and they're going to be leading the case. So what is happening on the 17th? There is a bond hearing motion is what it sounds like. So they're saying that he should be released so that he can go find new job prospects is what their attorneys are saying. Kevin Go says Brian lost his job due to the arrest and now has employment prospects. So he needs to be released so he can go get a job. Second motion was also filed, states that bringing the special prosecutor in is illegal. So because they brought in a black prosecutor, that is illegal. The state says that the previous DA, Tom Durden, did not provide sufficient grounds for disqualifying himself from the case. So the government switched prosecutors, and the defense of Roddy is now saying that, that was illegal. You can't switch prosecutors. So the motion asks for relief from prejudicial and inflammatory statements by individuals speaking on Arbery's behalf. So they're trying to really narrow the rules of how this trial is going to proceed. These are typically called motions in limine, but what they're trying to do is make sure that certain people can't say certain things, and that way it's not going to inflame the jury. And the judge actually has a lot of leeway to do that. There are rules that say you can kind of craft a fair trial that can include certain limitations on certain types of speech and certain types of activity. Whether or not they're going to get the African-American, the black man or black woman prosecutor off this case is an entirely separate story. That prosecutor, I think, is the fourth prosecutor on the case. And there's been a lot of changes bouncing around all over the place on that case. So this one is happening July 17th at 10 a.m. And of course, we will continue to follow along in that. We want to see if there will be justice in Ahmaud's case. Let's see. They're all entitled to due process. Gregory, Travis, and Roddy, they're all entitled to a fair trial. Nobody's arguing against that. We went through the statutes at length. I explained why this was not a lawful citizen's arrest, why everything that they're being charged with is justified. But let's see. Let's see how the prosecutor's office handles this trial, and let's see if there is any actual justice for Ahmaud. All right. The next case, the next one I want to update you on is an update on, of course, Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor, she was fatally shot by Louisville Metro PD on March 13th, 2020, and the officers involved have not been arrested. So if you remember this story, Breonna Taylor was in her bed sleeping. This was a young woman who was, of course, black, and she was an EMT, I believe. She was a nurse or in the medical profession. And she was somebody who, March 13th, was right around the time we had the national lockdown. And so we have the coronavirus sweeping through. She's somebody who we need on the front lines. She was at home in an apartment with her boyfriend, and the police shot 10 bullets through the window. They couldn't even see who was on the other side of it because there was foil or something covering the windows. And they shot her and killed her. She was shot multiple times. Her boyfriend, who was there, realized that they're under attack, fires back. He gets arrested and charged with attempted murder. Well, the police were investigating somebody who was already in custody, who wasn't even still the subject of the investigation. They were at the wrong apartment looking for the wrong person, and they shot and killed Breonna in cold blood, and there have been no arrests. So let's think. March 13th, April, May, June, July 13th. We're now on July 15th. So it's been 4 months. Nobody's been arrested on this. On Tuesday, more than 100 protesters marched to Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron's house, stood in front of his lawn, and demanded justice for Breonna Taylor. They demanded that Cameron criminally charge the 3 officers involved in the shooting. Since on Monday, Cameron said he did not have a timeline for when his office will conclude the investigation of the case. I've said this many, many times. This is the standard operating procedure for these different agencies. Justice delayed is justice denied. Breonna's family is living with her death in this sort of purgatory state. These officers who shot and killed her are on, as far as I know, free on the streets. They're just, free men. The only development that we have seen is that Officer Hankinson was fired on June 23rd, and the other 2 officers were only placed on administrative reassignment. So these guys have not even been arrested yet or charged. They fired their weapons and they killed somebody, but they're still free. The repercussions have been administrative reassignment and a firing, but no criminal charges. You or I do that, of course, that's murder. But these guys, they're free because they are police officers. And so what these departments do is they drag their feet on these things. They just let them linger. Because what happens? Since March 13th, how many other cases have we had? We've had George Floyd. We've had Ahmaud Arbery. We've had Rayshard Brooks. We've had James Garcia. We just talked about Mariah Valenzuela. It's just never ending. And so what the Breonna Taylor's department is going to do is they're just going to drag their feet, continue this thing on, let it go and go and go. And then suddenly they'll have a resolution, and because so much other stuff has been piled up, they're not going to have much nobody's going to have any interest in it. So they're going to be able to just kind of sweep this thing under the rug as they have been doing for years and years and years. But of course, we're not going to let them do that because we're covering the story today. Most of the public has probably forgotten about Breonna's case. We have not. We covered it from the very, very get-go before all the George Floyd stuff. We will continue to cover it, which is why, of course, you should subscribe to this channel. All right. The march at the Attorney General's house was organized by the National Social Justice Organization Until Freedom. Police surrounded the protesters, and they ended up arresting 87 people, charged each with intimidating a participant in a legal process, which is a felony, disorderly conduct, which is a misdemeanor, and criminal trespass in the third degree, which of course is a violation. So they go to protest, and they get arrested for it. Do you see how just sick this whole thing is? So these cops go to Breonna's house, they shoot and kill her. Her boyfriend fires back. They arrest him and charge him with attempted murder. It's like, guys, you were shooting into his house. He wasn't shooting into your house. He didn't know who you are. This was a no-knock raid. This was, after hours, if I'm not mistaken. And if somebody's firing bullets into your house and you don't know that they're the cops, even if they are the cops and somebody's firing bullets in your house and you return fire to protect your life, it sounds pretty justified to me. And so they arrested him for that. They arrested him and charged him with murder. So now there's been no justice for 4 months. This guy's lost his job, but he's out on the street. Protesters show up to the Attorney General's house. Guess what happens to them? You're all getting arrested too. How dare you protest, and how dare you come on our property? So look, I understand that there's a right way to protest and a wrong way to protest. I don't know the specifics of this protest. I don't know if they were, breaking into the house or something like that. There's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it, but it is not good. I mean, it's basically the police saying, yeah, we understand that you're protesting. We're not going to do anything about this. And if you show up again, we're all going to arrest you. And they arrested 87 people. Do you know how many people that is? It's like busloads of people that they're just hauling down to the station. So we'll see what happens with that story. I don't know if those charges are going to stick or not, but it is troubling. And we're going to continue to see what happens. I've got a couple quotes here. In response to the protest, Cameron said, the justice is not achieved by trespassing on private property, and it's not achieved through escalation. It's achieved by examining the facts in an impartial and unbiased manner. That is exactly what we're going to do in the investigation. From the beginning, our office is set out to do its job to fully investigate the events surrounding Miss Breonna Taylor. We continue with the thorough and fair investigation, and today's events will not alter the pursuit of the truth. So that is from, who is that? It's from Cameron. All right. So that's Breonna Taylor's story. We're going to continue to follow that one as well. We have another update. Today, now we're talking about Rayshard Brooks. Remember Rayshard Brooks? So this was another one with a lot of updates today. Rayshard Brooks was the gentleman who was shot and killed. He was shot in the back by Officer Garrett Rolfe. In this case, Rayshard Brooks was being investigated for a DUI stop. He gets pulled over. They start the investigation. And when it becomes clear that they're going to place him under arrest, he resists. There's absolutely an altercation that takes place. He starts running off. He actually overpowers two officers who he got the jump on him. They're putting his hands behind his back, and he escapes their grasp, and he is running off, and they shot him in the back. Now, he had a taser that he pointed back, but the officer who did it was Officer Garrett Rolfe. And you would think, that if you shot somebody in the back as they're running away, if you've been arrested for basically murdering somebody, that they keep you in custody. You're kind of a danger to society, and especially an officer, right? They should be held to a higher standard. When an officer fails on something, they have training, they have experience. This wasn't somebody who was just, confused about self-defense rules. It's never okay to shoot somebody in the back, but an officer especially, my goodness. So Garrett Rolfe is the name of that officer, and $250,000 has been raised for him for Officer Garrett Rolfe, and he is now out on bail, as a matter of fact. So he has an ankle monitor. He's facing a possible life sentence without parole, but he's out on bail. That means he is out and about. The Georgia Law Enforcement Organization has put together a fundraiser that is designed to help Officer Rolfe and his family pay for legal services and general necessities. More than 2,000 people have donated. The Georgia Law Enforcement Organization believes that the charges against Rolfe are political and the shooting is justified. And the Atlanta Police Foundation announced that every APD officer will get a $500 bonus after the $2 million is raised for the foundation. And that's because morale is low. Oh, no. Due to the fact that morale is low and there have been rumors of officers leaving, every officer is going to get $500. So stick around. That's the Rayshard Brooks updates. Next up, last week we talked about Ghislaine Maxwell. Ghislaine Maxwell, of course, was Jeffrey Epstein's right-hand woman, somebody responsible for allegedly trafficking in underage women for sex. He had Epstein Orgy Island. This was a story that has been wild from the very beginning. Just a wild story, all sorts of twists and turns. And then, of course, Ghislaine Maxwell was also arrested. We covered this story last week. She had a court date, and unlike Officer Rolfe, she was denied bail. She was denied bail yesterday on Tuesday because the judge said that Maxwell is a substantial risk of flight before her trial on sexual exploitation cases. And I think, of course, that is the right call 100%. There's no question about it. This person had already eluded law enforcement for a very, very long time. I read a different article. I don't think we have it clipped here, but there was, I think she stayed at 30 different places around the United States, just always moving from location to location to location because she didn't want to get picked up. Well, she did get picked up. And because of her resources, the judge says she cannot get out of custody. Maxwell's attorney had argued that Maxwell should be released on a strict bail package, while the government said that no combination of factors short of detention can guarantee her appearance for trial. Court also heard from two alleged victims who also urged the judge to deny bail, and the assistant U.S. attorney Allison Moe called Maxwell the very definition of a flight risk due to her financial resources and due to her British and French citizenship. So the judge set a tentative trial date for July 12th, 2021. So that's the trial date. Now, my guess is that is not going to happen. That's probably going to be pushed out a lot further than that because these cases can take a very long time, provided that they can keep her alive so that we can go through the process. Hopefully they are going to be making the necessary adjustments in order to ensure that that happens, unlike Epstein. That's Ghislaine Maxwell. All right, we've got Mr. and Mrs. Rambo. Talked about them also. The McCloskey. We've got a McCloskey update. A lot of updates today. We're getting caught up. We have a warrant that was served on this couple. Remember this couple? This is Mr. and Mrs. Rambo. They were out in front of their mansion, and they're white, and they have a lot of things, and there were protesters who came through the front gate in their private property, and they went and grabbed their guns. Remember this picture? They went and grabbed their guns. That's them standing there. Well, we talked about this where the actual district attorney, the prosecutor in their jurisdiction, said that, no, you can't do that, and they're going to be investigating this thing. So they issued a warrant. They went and they actually, looks like they seized one of their guns after defending their home from angry demonstrators who allegedly trespassed. McCloskey's warrant has been served, and their weapons have been seized. St. Louis Police Sergeant Keith Barrett seized the rifle as part of the investigation. The handgun was also turned over. And of course, we have a note there to look at the Castle Doctrine. The Castle Doctrine, if you don't remember, that was you can protect your home. It's your castle. It's your home. I've explained that previously on the show. So that's the McCloskeys. There's a lot of, this is going to be an interesting one. What was the warrant for? I have not seen a copy of it yet. If anybody has a copy of that warrant, I would love to see it. If, of course, it's public record, send it my way, and we could take a look at that. Why are they even continuing this investigation? I don't know what that's all about. Totally unjustified, but that's where we're at right now. Now, people are becoming so ideologically aligned that even something as fundamental as the Second Amendment, even as something as fundamental as being able to protect your home, you're now going to be investigated for that. A warrant. Now, look, something may come up. Maybe these guns were illegal and they got that big house because they're running drugs from Cuba or something like that. If that comes out, I'm going to change my opinion on this story. But from the looks of it, I think it's pretty clear. They had every right to protect themselves. They had every right to protect their home. What these protesters were doing was unlawful. The police, by the way, who everybody has been clamoring for to be defunded. Do you think they're going to show up if there's no police, if there's nothing to, nobody to keep order on the streets? There's going to be a lot more of this. We're going to see a lot more people who have to, unfortunately, resort to protecting their own property and their own lives if there's no law enforcement around. So it's kind of weird. You know, these people are very angry that they protected themselves, but they also want no more law enforcement. So the police won't protect them. So who's going to do the protecting? Doesn't make a lot of sense. I haven't figured that one out yet. If you have, drop it in the comments. I'd love to know what the rationale is on that one because I haven't seen it. All right, the next story. So we're going to wrap up with this one. This is like the bad popo mega hour. We've got seriously bad popo that we're about to fly through right now. All right, we've got 59 arrests and we have 2 jail sentences. So 59 people get arrested. 2 of them actually are convicted or have jail sentences. So 59 people get arrested. 2 of them go to jail. Well, how is that possible, right? Well, it's because they're cops. Hello. It's because 59 Jacksonville sheriff's officers who have been arrested since Sheriff Williams took office, only 2 of them have been to jail. It's because they are cops. They are police officers. Jacksonville Sheriff Mike Williams claims to hold his own workers accountable by repeatedly arresting the employees. So he makes the arrest. It looks good. Everybody's going to jail, but not everybody is actually going to jail. 59 employees have been arrested in the last 5 years and all avoided jail sentences due to plea deals, diversion programs, and non-prosecution agreements. Almost all who were arrested do not work at the sheriff's office any longer and have avoided criminal consequences by having their charges dropped, reduced, or diverted. At least, listen to this, at least 31 of the arrests were felony charges for falsifying records, beating up inmates, and helping coordinate drug deals. 31. These are all sheriff's office employees. 31 of them were felony charges for falsifying records, beating up inmates, helping coordinate drug deals. 2 officers that did go to jail. One was for DUI, which typically is mandatory jail, and an officer who pled guilty to 2 rape charges. 2 rape charges. He went to jail. 17 of the officers were accused of violence, aggravated assault, battery, and rape. None faced jail time. 3 cases are still pending. 47 people have been shot by the Jacksonville officers. 31 died, yet no charges have ever been filed for an officer shooting someone. So we talked about a lot of the problems that Phoenix has. Jacksonville's got their hands full too. This is like a criminal gang. This is like an enterprise. We've got falsifying records, crimes of moral turpitude, dishonesty. We've got beating up inmates. We've got actually coordinating drug deals. We've got rape. We've got aggravated assault. We've got battery. We've got all of these things. These are law enforcement. This is sheriff's office employees. These are people who work to stop these things, not commit them. Well, wait a minute. Well, who are these people? Let's take a look because we know. We've got John Biggerstaff. You can see this box right here. He's a police reserve officer. He was accused of promoting prostitution business and using his job to tip off people selling cocaine about the police. While on probation, he tested positive for cocaine and he was given 38 days in jail. We've got Nathan McCloskey. He's a corrections officer. He pleaded guilty to 1 rape charge after raping 2 women after they fell asleep at a party. That's him right there. That's Nathan. We've got Officer Tommy Bailey. He's accused of becoming angry during a poker game, and he pulled a gun on another poker player and was charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, which is a pretty serious crime, but he was only convicted of improper exhibition of a firearm. So, of course, he did not get any jail time. No jail time there for Officer Tommy Bailey. Officer Tim James, charged with repeatedly punching a handcuffed 17-year-old in the back of a police car while the sergeant shouted for him to stop. Charged with battery instead of child abuse. We see this one all the time. Every time a cop hits somebody in handcuffs, that's a felony. You can't hit a restrained person, somebody in handcuffs, somebody tied up, somebody gagged. You can't hit them. You can't injure them. So when cops put somebody in a handcuff and hit them, that's a problem. In Arizona, at least, that's a felony. But they always drop it down. Once it goes to the prosecutor's office, they just reduce those things down like it's nothing. Happens every day. Would that happen to you? No. Would it happen to me? No, of course. we're going to get prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. They're not even going to think twice about that. Next one, we've got James Smith. James Smith is a corrections officer who was accused of pulling a gun on his fiance and threatening to kill her. Felony charge, once again, reduced to a violation of a municipal ordinance. So you take a serious felony charge, pointing a gun at somebody, which is like an aggravated assault charge. Felony. You can't do that. Reduced down to a violation of a municipal ordinance, which is like usually a disorderly conduct, very minor, slap on the wrist, no jail time. Would that happen to you or me? Probably not. Next, we have even more officers. Oh my goodness. We've got Stephen Ray Tilley, another corrections officer accused of threatening to put a hole in his girlfriend's head. Nice guy. Posted nude photos of her on her Instagram, and the case is still under investigation for cyber harassment. So that is another corrections officer. We've got Brandon Maynard, who traded porn magazines and cigarettes for a chance to date an inmate's girlfriend. What? He was released without bail, and he pled guilty to that charge. We've got Tom McDonald. Tom McDonald was caught putting his hand under a woman's shirt and grabbing her chest, threatened to fight the woman's boyfriend. Charge was diverted. Motion was filed to expunge the arrest. So he's an officer. He grabs somebody's chest. He's going to fight the boyfriend, and he gets what's a diversion program. So he goes and he takes some classes. He goes and learns about why you shouldn't grab women's unsolicited breasts and beat up their boyfriends. He's going to go get training about that. He's going to go do a class, and then they're going to dismiss the charges and, of course, expunge the arrest. So that's, again, ask yourself, would you get that same benefit? Would your charges be dismissed if you did something like that? Hard to say, but I'm going to venture no. Next big one we've got, this name is very difficult to pronounce, Akinyemi Borisati. It was an officer who was filmed arresting a drunk woman and slamming her into the pavement, caught on camera shoving the woman into a wall and hitting her stomach and chest and face with a closed fist. Officer's case is sealed and cannot be found. The woman who was assaulted received a trespassing charge and resisting arrest charge and can still be found on the clerk's website. So that was this gentleman here. We see his photograph. We've got Kyle Kiviz and Lance Griffiths. They were accused of tampering with evidence at an officer's shooting scene. Charges dropped and arrests have been sealed and expunged. So again, more tampering of evidence, more falsifying documents. This is active dishonesty that we are talking about. And then finally, we've got one more page because, as I said, there were 59 of these people from the sheriff's office. So let's go through them. This is the bad popo segment. And we've got Officer Erica McRae. She was arrested on child abuse charge. Her case is no longer available. We've got an unknown officer who was caught on camera punching and pepper spraying a shackled woman who was driving on a suspended license, then accused of lying on the report. The investigation, of course, is still pending. We've got some other unknown officers who face charge for the abuse of a disabled adult after restraining an inmate in the mental health unit and hitting him. And then we've got Matthew Butler, who is our final bad popo of the day, who was a police officer. He faces possible life sentence for felony sexual battery charges. He's accused of raping and molesting 2 girls for years, one since she was 9 years old. He was released on bond. Then he violated his conditions by driving near one of the victims, and he's now being held in jail. Whoa. I need to catch my breath. That was a lot of really now being bad in popo. Jail. Really bad popo. So that's what we've got for the show today. I think we're going to start ending with something a little bit more uplifting, a little bit more fun, because that last one was a little bit rough. I don't have anything for you today, but we're going to start thinking about it because raping a girl for a 9-year-old for multiple years and then being released on bond, that's a pretty nice benefit for a police officer. Normal people with those types of charges, they don't get out of custody ever. But of course, they let a cop out. All right, let's take a look at the comments here from the YouTube section. So I typically look at comments only on YouTube. It's just easier for me to check one place. So if you're going to be commenting on Facebook or Periscope, bring those over to YouTube. It's the place to be, I promise. All right, so let's take a look at some of these. We got a comment from Ahan Police footage also documents another officer instructing the policeman on the scene to cover your ass in the paperwork. So he's talking about the Mariah Valenzuela case. And of course, that's absolutely true. They say CYA in that video. So one of the officers rolls up on the scene, didn't witness anything that happened with Officer McGillis. And we know that he's talking to his supervisor, who says, it's very important that you start doing all of these documents, the use of force paperwork and so on, so that we all CYA. Cover your ass is what that stands for. They want to protect themselves. They really know that, Officer McGillis is probably a little bit of a hothead and they have some concerns or thoughts about him. They basically blamed the victim. So multiple times they said, well, she was rubbing the blood on herself. She's Looney Tunes. She's going crazy. No, guys, you were the cause of that. Somebody wants to post his home address on here, which of course is not a good idea. We don't want to dox anybody. I don't think that's good policy. We can discuss it here, but we don't need any home addresses. I had a coworker that was under the legal limit, .08, still got a DUI. Even if you're under the legal limit, you still get a DUI. It's cop-splaining. Yeah, so that's true. You can get a DUI for being under the legal limit. Many people don't know this, but the legal limit is sort of it's the threshold. If you're over that limit, then the law says that they can presume that you are impaired. They can just say, if you're over this limit, you're drunk. Doesn't matter if you feel drunk. Doesn't matter if you look drunk or if you perform the field sobriety test well. If you're over that limit, you're drunk according to the law. But doesn't mean that you have to be over the limit. There are DUIs that are called impaired to the slightest degree, which means if you're impaired to any degree, any amount whatsoever, they can charge you with a DUI for that. Now, they typically don't if you're lower than that legal limit because it's difficult to prove. Now, they have to prove that you're drunk. They can't presume you were drunk. But if they think they have enough evidence to do that, they will. So we've seen people charged and prosecuted for DUIs under the legal limit. Those cases typically don't go very well for the government because they're not good cases. So they don't run with a lot of those. But if there was a situation where it was close, or somebody was injured, then they would certainly move forward with that. All right, so we've got a comment from Zulu Zeit. To be fair, the cop was annoyed, so chains and beatings, right? You guys talk like cops should never indulge in their violent fetishes. I'm so confused. Okay. You guys talk like cops should never indulge in their violent fetishes. That's true. We do talk like that. Yeah, they shouldn't. There are other more appropriate fetishes for these cops to be engaged in. They do not need to be beating civilians on the streets. 6 months ago, she'd be dead already. That comment from Lady Zaga, who's always here every week. What's up, Lady Zaga? The big difference has been people filming the cops. I think that is a big difference. And there are a lot more people who are actively thinking through what we're seeing from our law enforcement people. Body cams are like kryptonite. They know they are recording themselves and they are genuinely incapable of acting differently. And Zulu Zeit says, thanks, James. Yeah, James is a great guest. Really glad that he was on the show and that he was able to get the result that he got in that case, because there were some good developments. I don't think we talked about the disposition. I didn't ask him about that, but I think the case has been resolved successfully, and I am hopeful that she does get the compensation that she deserves. He mentioned that she's got a civil lawyer who is filing a notice of claim with the city of Phoenix, and that hopefully she gets some compensation. Yep, even on blast, Lady Zaga says, even on blast, the cops can't help themselves. So they bug down their union with the claim and so on and so forth. Okay, well, I wonder if anyone gets PTSD after being brutalized while restrained. Seems like that would be a thing. Yeah, you would think so. You would think that if you're 98 pounds and you're 5'2" and a guy in a DUI van who you don't know comes rushing up on you in the middle of the street, in the middle of nowhere, and barking at you to give him things like your ID and starts barking orders at you, and then smashes you on the ground, bruises your entire body, cracks your head into the car, you think that might cause some PTSD. I would think so. If a city council says to a police department that, hey, you guys can't keep killing people anymore, and we're going to actually, hold you to a higher standard, I don't know how that would cause PTSD, but I am not a super hyper fragile cop, so I do not know. All right. So a couple other comments. Still not arrested. Yeah. What the, WTF? Yep. That's true. How come Ahmaud wasn't allowed due process? It's true. You're right. He was not allowed due process, and that's why they're being charged with murder, and that is why they should spend the rest of their lives in prison. That is why, because they took somebody's life without justification to do that. They murdered him, and they forfeit their life. When you murder somebody, you forfeit your life, and that's what we want to see happen. Count out the months. Yep, it's sort of like my counting routine. All right, whoa, rest in peace, the Texas Administrative Reassignment. That's so 2013. Palliative distraction tactics have evolved. Yep. Shot right through the wall of their home. Quick thing, the channel logo down right is hard to see. It's also sitting right in front of dark furniture. Yeah, you're probably right. And that suggestion comes from David Bob. It's a good suggestion. I could probably make that white and really improve the quality of that. But that's a lot of work for me to do. So we'll see when I get to it. I like how these cases are presented in order of infuriating egregiousness. Well played. The damage is done. I wish I hadn't heard that. No worries. We can start a grassroots campaign to fix the corrupt logo. Yeah. If somebody wants to start that campaign, I'll support it, and I'll do what I can. All right. Her gin wasn't even functional. It would have been awkward had something happened. That's probably a good reflection of many cop shops. What determines whether there is a jail sentence as opposed to a prison sentence? I feel like you have explained before, but I can't remember. That question comes from Zulu Zeit. So it's a great question, and it's going to depend on your state. But really, what it comes down to is sort of the nature of the charge. So in Arizona, we have three main category of offenses. You can get a civil offense, which is going to be like a speeding ticket, following too close, going 15 over the speed limit, unsafe lane change. Those types of things are all going to be civil. You don't get any jail for those. You get points on your license, and you get a fine. The next category up are what are called misdemeanors. And so think of these as like DUIs, most domestic violence offenses, disorderly conduct, urinating in public, criminal trespass, and all of those. Those are defined by our statutes, by our law in Title 13, and they say that you go to jail for those. That's the penalty. You don't go to prison. The penalty is jail, and the maximum penalty for a Class 1 is 6 months. So you can't go to prison for those. You can get a really bad DUI with a really high blood alcohol content level, and they can't send you to prison unless something else aggravates that and turns that misdemeanor into a felony. So felonies is the highest category. That's the highest tier, and there are many, many different permutations of how the sentencing rules work for felonies, but some of them are probation eligible. So like for first offense drug crimes, you get probation for that. You don't go to prison or to jail. But if it's a third offense drug crime, now you're going to prison. Now this is something that it's not going to be a misdemeanor. You've got sort of 3 strikes with drugs, or if it's a DUI situation, let's say it's your third DUI, it's going to be an aggravated DUI, or, one of these officers, they're committing sexual battery or, raping 9-year-old girls. Those are all prison offenses because they're defined in our statutes. In our laws, they say, if you rape somebody, you go to prison for 25 to life. And so they're defined by the statutes. That's how that works. Defunding is not, but you don't understand defunding the police 59 cops. I think that is asking, should we defund? Sure, I'm happy to defund those cops for sure. Yeah. And any of these officers, any of the people who covered up for these officers, any of the cultural malfeasance that's ingrained in the police departments, any of these people who are just whitewashing this stuff and covering it up, sweeping it all under the rug, all of those people, should be defunded. They can be canceled. We want to expunge them from law enforcement. But that does not mean that the entire concept, the entire thought of having law enforcement is invalid. I certainly think that there are ways to rethink it, and there are ways to screen out a lot of these bad actors, but massive overhaul for sure is on the table. My sort of position is that I am not one of the advocates saying we need to take the $6 billion from the NYPD and just make it go away. I don't think that is the answer, because we're seeing what's happening as this, as more and more unrest is going on. We're seeing more shootings, more killings, more people leaving, more people moving. I mean, it's more chaos. So I do think that law enforcement has a legitimate function in our society, but the current makeup of it is extremely problematic. One of the ways I think we can handle that is by more transparency, more accountability, total cultural reform, and by the public demanding this action, demanding this change, which of course is why I do the show, why I want to just carry this conversation on, because I think it's important to be just to be talking about these issues and putting some stakes in the ground and saying, we know what you're doing, we see it, we're listening, and and sort of, build a little bit momentum to see what we can do to cause some change and to rally some people to our side of this debate. All right, I think this one comes from Don Clayton. I think the departments of officers should be held accountable for misleading and mishandling evidence. And I totally agree with that. Yeah, I mean, some of these things are genuine mistakes. People are going to make mistakes, no question about it. But if there's evidence that they're falsifying data, manipulating data, or omitting data, if they're doing some things like James talked about on the show today, where he's saying there's no evidence that she was driving the wrong way, no evidence at all. I've got other documents about McGillis that show that he had all sorts of no sustained previous misconduct, but all sorts of like little white lies that are happening throughout his career. We've got other documents to show that. So there are problems here where there's smoke, there's fire. And when these cops are circling the wagons and they're protecting themselves, we want to hold them accountable. Lady Zaga wraps up some of the comments. In Canada, less than 2 years sentence is provincial jail. 2 years plus a day is federal prison. So it's kind of like that here in Arizona, but we send you to prison a lot sooner. If it's 4 months, you can go to prison. If it's 6 months, you can go to prison. If it's a multiple of years, you can go to prison. So you can go to prison for 4 months on certain offenses. Federal time means you can be held anywhere in Canada. And that wraps us up on the comments on the YouTube channel. Thank you, everybody, for those nice comments. Thanks for being here. Thanks for watching the show. It's a lot of fun when I know that I'm talking to somebody. So thank you for that. And that's a lot of fun. And got to plug the book, right? I got to plug the book. So Beginning to Winning is my book, and I released this last month. Super excited about it. It's how to fight your case and succeed in the criminal justice system. That's me back there. It's got everything. It's got 9 parts of a criminal case, how they apply to you. It's got some stories from me and how I sort of evolved into the position where I'm at now. It's got, characteristics to build your defense. It's got a lot of valuable stuff. A lot of the stuff we use here at our firm. So if you want to pick that up, absolutely pick it up. It's available on Amazon. I would love a review if you would be so inclined. And I will be sure to see you back here at the same time next week, 4 p.m. for Watching the Watchers Wednesday. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of your night, and I'll see you next week.